Hello, everyone. I'm Philippe. I'm going to talk to you about foundations for quality. I've given this talk a few days ago at adidas testing day here in Spain, and this is basically a re-recording of that talk. So I will skip the intro part a bit because most of this information is already on my blog, or you can reach me out on my social media. Every day we're led to believe everything is okay, everything is going to be fine at some point. From some perspectives, maybe, but for customers of a product or users, these people sometimes think otherwise. For example, one minute you're trying to order something from an online food service, the next minute you, as a tester, find yourself debugging 500 error responses in this food service API. At one point, maybe your loved one says, "You're wasting time, let's just use some other food service." And if you're a tester, you keep investigating this on and on and on, and the error that we get still makes no sense. You have the money in your card, maybe the details of the payment are all okay, everything seems okay, but why is this food service not working? And in the meantime, your loved one is getting impatient and angry with you because you're already distracted testing something, and you decide, okay, screw it, let's order from this whole different place, only to find out that your card does not work in another country under some conditions because reasons. At that moment, I ask myself, why would someone do this to any user? I think it's because at one point we as a collective lost track of what's the north and south in software industry, and we lose ourselves a bit every day. Now, this happens to me when I start doubting a lot of the assumptions I had. For instance, that the software industry knows what it is doing most of the times. Personally, I'm not so sure, because at times, do we really know? Why do we test? What is quality? How does one assure quality? What is a bug? All of these questions, valid questions, at times I think that we are losing touch with them. We're so distracted every day by everything and anything when we're testing in a project that we start to lose touch. We forget basic foundations for any software project. Our problem in any company right now revolves a lot of times to this. Not necessarily lack of culture or some cool and hip office and whatnot. No, not really. But I think that no matter if we're directors, seniors, juniors, interns, our problem comes down always to this lack of foundations or handicapped foundations. So, what do we do? At some point, we need to treat ourselves. We need to rethink not our strategy, but rethink our whole foundations. So, I invite all of you to follow along, and I'll show 6 example rules that we can try to apply for treatment of this problem where we lack some basic foundations. The best foundation I believe we can have that will constructively impact our project is respecting and loving testing. When I interview people, for example, I don't care a lot about how many certifications they have or how many years they spent on the best company in the world. I do care if they understand what is the difference between testing, quality assurance, and quality control. Now, people in the 90s, they knew this difference. Why did we forget at any point in time? I do care if you understand that there is no such thing as automated testing. Testing is a human activity. It can be aided by tools and scripts, but you don't turn up to a programmer, for example, and ask, "Oi, are you a manual programmer or an automation programmer?" I care if the person, for instance, is able to deconstruct, say, a problem, a specific system, and define a meaningful testing strategy for it, and if that person is using their brain. I care if that person speaks the truth without fear, if they are combative, if they do not lie, if they understand that we as testers don't break the product, we break the illusion that the product is not broken. Now, I invite you all to learn and open your mind to the possibility that maybe what we know about testing, no matter if we have a card saying that we are certified, maybe for all this time it is still too little. Rule number 2, don't be sloppy. Let's say you are a developer and you do not care to learn about anti-patterns, design patterns, maybe some good software engineering concepts, and where and when to apply them with balance. Now, you're setting yourself up for being sloppy, and sloppiness and quality in projects, they don't mix together. There should be no place for anti-patterns, for example, and sloppiness in projects. This is the same for a tester. It comes down to asking yourself, is my way of working, say, the most appropriate way of working in this context? Or I simply don't care. When we don't care, we get sloppy and we lose touch on things. Learning, taking time to learn, feeding our brain with good software engineering and development concepts, maybe with some management concepts, with good testing concepts. That is setting ourselves up for not being sloppy, which in turn benefits our projects. For instance, for testers, feed your brain with psychology, with communication, heuristics, system thinking, how people think, how people learn. Tidy your mind in order to tidy your project. Rule number 3: aim for traceability. Time and time again, I see people complaining about the lack of scope and lack of traceability sometimes in projects. These moments when you're not able to trace back changes to the why those changes came to be, or if the changes are too confusing. People who have worked for some time in the software industry probably see a lot of this type of patterns happening where you see, for instance, people working on a ticket for more than a week, or working on a ticket with poor description, or working on a code change in a pull request that is not linked to any ticket, and probably seeing commits in the code base that have absolutely no information linked to them. And let me give you the bad news and be real. It's part our fault. At any point in time, when we're working on a software project, we can take the mature decision of telling maybe our fellow developer, our fellow project manager, our fellow product owner to kindly go take a walk and tell them, I will not stand for this attack on the traceability and scope of our project. Now, of course, this approach is a bit violent, maybe not the most effective and efficient solution in order to fix traceability problems in software projects. We're all adults and we don't need to be rude to anyone, but we always need to keep in mind that for every rushed, untraceable decision, a sea of problems and incidents will always appear. Even if they don't appear instantly, it will always be a snowball. Rule number 4: refine the release process. I say that an optimized release process is like a well functioning restaurant. They can take in anything. Slow days where maybe one or two people show up, and those nights where there's a line of people outside waiting to eat. And here's an example of what I think in every software project we should aim for in terms of refining the release process. On the other day, after Christmas last year, in one of the open source projects I worked with, Tacit CSS Framework, we got a pull request fixing a mildly serious accessibility issue. And because the merging, release, and deployment processes are fairly documented and automated, with resource to, for example, a DevOps bot named Walter, I could in a matter of minutes and without leaving the GitHub page, code review the change, approve the change, and then tell the bot to merge it and release it out to the world. All in a matter of minutes and done through GitHub comments. So my advice with this rule is pay close attention to your release process, study it, and study alternatives, and always aim to refine it so that any able person can fix and release a serious problem in a matter of minutes without having to do a lot of work that ends up being a repetition of steps that can be done in a more automated way. Rule number 5: enforce code quality. At any point in time, if we have a software project and we are reusing static analysis and we are checking code quality through means of some tools and a code review process and whatnot, we need to ask ourselves if the automated tools that we're using, for instance, for verification of code quality, if they are making any sort of difference. Now, because, for instance, we can have them set up to throw in warnings, for example, that maybe our code does not obey to a specific code style, or our code has some anti-patterns even though the code works. What that means is if we just see the warnings from time to time, and those warnings provided by those code quality tools, if they're not being respected, if they're not failing the build, we're not using the full power of those tools. So why use it at all? We are only fooling ourselves, because if it's not enforced, it's not there doing anything, and it's not, so to speak, slapping us in the face and telling us we have a problem here, and no matter how small that problem is, then it's not doing anything. It is as useful as a document stating some rules about code quality in our project. Some people will read that document, some people will apply from time to time the rules of that document, but if we have a chance to enforce in an automated way some code quality restrictions, we shouldn't lie to ourselves and just set up these tools, but we're not really paying attention to them. Final rule: documenting. I can't stress this enough, but we should fall in love with taking notes. We should fall in love with explaining in a practical way the pillars of our projects. This is how, for example, our build is made in the project. This is how we can run tests. This is how we can run database migrations. This is how we can see the logs. Time and time again, we jump in on new projects only to find out that we need to ask someone something instead of just going to a quick start document like we would do in any open source project. That's why I say we should fall in love with documenting, even documenting the boring stuff that our brain already knows that we think that we will never forget, but our brain will thank us later. There are more rules, many more. These are the ones I find most crucial and most basic, and that we can basically pick them up at any time and try to apply them in our project. Because a lot of times, with each of these six rules, sometimes we fail in some part of them. That's all the time I have for now. Thank you for watching this video. If you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments section on YouTube. And thank you for watching.